Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about grounding, and I'm going to be asking Mark a bunch of questions on this topic because I think it's a really important uh, thing to cover. And there are a lot of assumptions, a lot of beliefs that people have. There are a lot of stories that I've heard about this topic. So I think Mark is really a great person to ask about some of these things. So, hi, Mark.
Hi, Ankush, and hello, everyone. And, happy to be back with you to um, share on this topic for our program.
So I guess let's just kind of jump in, and maybe the first place to start with is people might not understand what we mean by grounding. So what does that mean?
Ankush, I really want to help people see that grounding is simply about um, the level of understanding you have that's come to you from your understanding of the principles or Sydney Banks teachings. And uh, why we call it grounding is because the minute you have that realization or insight, um, it will cover all areas of your life. So when you're at a little higher level of consciousness, that will be shown in every area of your life. So that's all grounding is the insight or realization you've had. Now, it's not intellectual. So it's not an intellectual knowing of the principles or Sid Bank's teachings. It's actually a truly an insight that you've had, and that's your grounding. That's what you've seen about your true nature or the nature of life through the principles or Sydney Banks teachings. Like for me, the first insight I had was that emotions are made up and thought relates to emotions, and that affected my whole life. I started to look within and look to the way I was thinking, and that affected all areas of my life. So grounding is simply your realization of the true nature of the principles and Sydney Banks teachings.
So you said a few things there. It's not intellectual, and you use the word insight. So can I just paraphrase this back? What you're saying is when someone has an insight, a realization about the three principles, which is what Sydney Banks described, that depth of understanding, that depth of seeing it beyond our intellect, like really knowing it to be true, that's what we're describing as grounding, just to be clear.
That's right. And that would be a rise in a person's level of consciousness, or it's the same thing as your level of understanding or your awareness of. And it's really, tapping into the fact that we can learn through realizations, that there's a wisdom we're a part of that brings us understanding at a different level than using the intellect. And once that happens, that's your level of grounding.
So why is this so important?
Well, look, for us in looking at three principles coaching and becoming more impactful, it's important because that's the work. I mean, that's what you're sharing in our work in three principles coaching. You're sharing your understanding. You're not sharing an approach, um, techniques from other kinds of coaching approaches. Um, uh, Practices that people need to do. With the real heart of three principles of coaching is you are sharing this insight. That's what That's what you're doing during your coaching session. In other words, you're sharing what you know now. And that's the heart of Three Principles coaching. That's the impact of Three Principles coaching. So, as I've shared on many different webinars, I've been asked to be a guest. The first thing I saw was thought creates feeling. And that's all I shared with people. Everything else I was trained in didn't make sense to do because I knew if people could get their own insight like I did, um, they would be okay. They didn't have to learn all these other strategies or techniques or understandings of the past or things like that. So, why grounding is so important in Three Principles coaching is that's what you speak from. See, and it's really and the value of speaking from what you might call the insight, your heart, what's true for you now means that you're not speaking from your intellect. You're not trying to talk about the principles like somebody on the videos that you've watched talks about it. You're talking about it as you've seen it, and that's the coaching part. That's the that's what you're talking to people about.
Yeah, I really love that because for me, the deeper that I've seen the principles, and it took me years, it took me many years before I got even comfortable writing down mind, thought, and consciousness on a flip chart in the training and explaining it because I didn't really get it. But the deeper that I did, I've noticed in my coaching that my questions are different. If I tell a story, that might be different. And one of the things that I've heard is that coaching is really about helping the client come to the conclusion, helping a client find their own answer. And for me, that aligns perfectly with the principles as you've described. It's not, and I know you use the word teaching, but it's not really a teaching um, in the traditional sense of like, this is what I know, therefore you've got to know this. Could you talk about, because I see it more of a pointing for someone to get their own insights.
Yeah, what you're saying is so true. Yeah, I use the word teaching. I always have, and I don't mean it in a traditional sense. Um, you know, um, the emphasis in Three Principles coaching on grounding is simply that, uh, I've heard through the last many years around people seeming to get to the point where they say, I know this principle, tell me about this other principle. And I think the ongoing emphasis on grounding is that uh, the understanding of what Sydney Banks is pointing to with the principles is infinite. There's just more you can see. And the more you see, again, you've got another level of consciousness that you've risen to. So the landscape is different in a more positive way. And so it really aids how you coach people. You get more human, you get more easy and comfortable, you see more to share, you hear more things that you didn't hear before. So that's why the emphasis is on ongoing grounding and not resting on your laurels, because resting on your laurels is a misunderstanding. No one knows the principles. No one. I mean, you get close and you get good glimmers of it. You've got a nice feel for them, but my goodness, don't stay there. There's something more to see about them. Honestly, we were bragging one time walking after a weekend. We were having a weekend meeting with Sydney Banks, and we were walking to get lunch. And there was a group of us bragging about how we knew thought and how it was changing our lives. And it was. We did understand thought differently than before our understanding of the principles. And then Sid turned around and said, "You don't know anything. You just have had a glimmer of what I've seen." And again, he kept humbling us, and we're open to that uh, because we wanted to just see more. So that's why the emphasis is on grounding. And so you don't look to see more. You just live in what you've seen. You coach from what you've seen. If you drift a bit in your coaching session to getting intellectual or you lose the feeling for it, you'll see that. And then just bring yourself back to, well, what do I know today? That's really helped me so much in coaching, is that you've got this foundation or a signpost. I don't know the right word for it, but if I kind of get away from what I'm knowing, I feel a little lost. I just come back to, okay, what do I know now? What's my point? What am I trying to say to my client? And I might say that to them. You know what? I got a little ahead of what I know. Can we go back? Where were we? What is it here's what I wanted to share with you. Can we go from there and, start again? And they'll support you because they really hear that you're talking truth. They really hear you want to be genuine with them. So, really, it's an ongoing evolution the rest of your life, of this understanding.